Mrs. Clinton might be called up stairs. The poor wretch, changing colour, would have escaped out of the room, but being prevented, dropped on her knees, and implored forgiveness. Her confession of the whole affair was then extorted from her. Doubtless, my dear Sir, you must remember Dame Green, who was my first nurse. The deceit she has practised was suggested, she said, by a conversation she overheard, in which my unhappy mother besought you, that if her child survived her, you would take the sole care of its education, and in particular, if it should be a female, you would by no means part with her in early life. You not only consented, she says, but assured her you would even retire abroad with me yourself, if my father should importunately demand me. Her own child, she said, was then in her arms, and she could not forbear wishing it were possible to give her the fortune which seemed so little valued for me. This wish, once raised, was not easily suppressed. On the contrary, what at first appeared a mere idle desire, in a short time seemed a feasible scheme. Her husband was dead, and she had little regard for anybody but her child; and, in short, having saved money for the journey, she contrived to inquire a direction to my father, and, telling her neighbours she was going to settle in Devonshire, she set out on her expedition. When Mrs. Selwyn asked her how she dared perpetrate such a fraud, she protested she had no ill designs, but that, as Miss would never be the worse for it, she thought it pity nobody should be the better. Her success we are already acquainted with. Indeed, everything seemed to contribute towards it. My father had no correspondent at Berry Hill. The child was instantly sent to France, where, being brought up in as much retirement as myself, nothing but accident could discover the fraud. And here let me indulge myself in observing, and rejoicing to observe, that the total neglect I thought I met with was not the effect of insensibility or unkindness, but of imposition and error; and that, at the very time we concluded I was unnaturally rejected, my deluded father meant to show me most favour and protection. He acknowledges that Lady Howard's letter flung him into some perplexity. He immediately communicated it to Dame Green, who confessed it was the greatest shock she had ever received in her life; yet she had the art and boldness to assert, that Lady Howard must herself have been deceived, and as she had, from the beginning of her enterprise, declared she had stolen away the child without your knowledge, he concluded that some deceit was then intended him, and this thought occasioned his abrupt answer. Dame Green owned that, from the moment the journey to England was settled, she gave herself up for lost. All her hope was to have had her daughter married before it took place, for which reason she had so much promoted Mr. Macartney's addresses; for, though such a match was inadequate to the pretensions of Miss Belmont, she well knew it was far superior to those her daughter could form after the discovery of her birth. My first enquiry was, if this innocent daughter was yet acquainted with the affair. No, Mrs. Selwyn said, nor was any plan settled how to divulge it to her. Poor unfortunate girl! How hard is her fate! She is entitled to my kindest offices, and I shall always consider her as my sister. I then asked whether my father would again allow me to see him. Why, no, my dear, not yet, answered she. He declares the sight of you is too much for him. However, we are to settle everything concerning you to-morrow, for this woman took up all our time to-day. This morning, therefore, she is again gone to the Hot Wells. I am waiting in all impatience for her return; but as I know you will be anxious for the account this letter contains, I will not delay sending it. End of Letter 78.